Well, they have. It depends on how you define the films, the independent films they're making. These days you've got with digital, you've got no budget movies left and right. It's hard. I think those films, they need to be in a class of their own because it's not fair to them to try to equate them. These films that are being made for $2,000 or $3,000, whatever they could wrestle together with their high def camera gear, but most of it is not to be very seriously considered. Do they have it easier? They have it easier if they would just want to go out and hey guys, hey kids, let's go out and make a movie. It's much easier because you can make a movie for very little. The quality, the aesthetic of the film, whether or not you could actually consider it a real movie. It's a movie in its own class, I suppose. But
So I definitely want to talk about Lucas Haas. He was just at the very start of his career. What made him right for the part?
he was, as far as I was concerned, he was Frankie. I'd seen him in Witness. I'd seen him in Testament. Those are really the only two things I'd seen, but that was enough. He was the right age, and I knew that this kid was extraordinary. That he had an innate ability to express his feelings. That's what acting's all about, and convey those feelings to an audience. And he did it so naturally. So we went to him first. I brought Lynn Stallmaster on to cast the picture, and the first actor we went to was Lucas. His parents, of course, he was only 9 years old, I think at the time, 10 years old, read the script. They loved the script. And then they sat with him, and read it with him, and he loved it. And he came into my office, and it was basically a done deal, right off the bat. They liked me. They liked my approach, my enthusiasm, I suppose. They liked what they saw on the written page more than anything else, and they hoped that I'd be able to somehow or other at least get close to what was there on the page. Alex Rocco was... Alex came in and read, and I thought he was terrific. But I was concerned about his image, about the kinds of characters he'd been playing prior, and he was known for. He was kind of rough-edged as to his working persona as an actor. But he wanted the role desperately. He loved the part, and so I said, well, I got to figure out who's going to play Phil, who's the heavy, the villain of the piece. And initially, I had approached Scott Wilson, because I'd always thought highly of Scott. And we talked, we had a number of conversations, he read the script, and then he decided he wanted to pass simply because he said he was concerned about, in Cold Blood, he didn't want to, in Cold Blood it happened a number of years prior, but at least this is what he told me. He told me that he was concerned a bit about playing a heavy character like that again, It feels pretty dark character. So when he passed, the idea of Len Cariou came to mind after my experience with Sweeney Todd. And I remember asking, Len came out to LA from New York after he'd read the script. And once I decided that Len was right, that made Alex work for me. They were both around the same age, and I could see that working. So Alex was thrilled. And when I finally said yes, but he campaigned mightily. He dyed his hair to look younger. He called me. We went out to have drinks. He called me to have drinks with him, and I loved Alex dearly. And it meant a lot to him, this film. And he did a great job. Len, I remember being in my office as we were trying to close the deal. He was out in L.A., and his agent kept insisting for more money. And once again, we couldn't do that because we had agreed to a certain pay scale as relates to everybody. We were other people. Some of the lead actors were making more than others, but everybody was in the same kind of range. And I remember Len getting on the phone because Andy LaMarca, who was co-producing the picture with me, was in an adjacent office. I could hear him fighting it out with Len's agent. Len just got up at one point from my office, sitting with me. went over the phone, picked it up, and said, "Make the fucking deal." And that was it. And hung up the phone. And so we made the deal.
I love that. So I want to ask this question. Lady in White is a great example of what we often refer to as kinder trauma. You know, films that are ostensibly for kids but have disturbing elements. Why do you think this sort of story resonates with young viewers?
Because it has to do with loss, I think, and coming to terms with loss. The fear of losing one's parent. Loss in general. I mean, from the word go, as soon as we become cognizant beings, we fear loss. We fear the loss of an infant, your mother's breast, and you need to be fed and nurtured from the word go. Then as we become even more intelligent and sentient, we realize that there are dark forces, including the fact that we all live and die, and that being the darkest force of all, that threaten to leave us alone, and helpless. So I think that theme of loss and coming to terms with loss, dealing with loss, is universal. So it's not just kids. It's not just kids. It has to do with everybody. That makes the film so compelling and emotionally satisfying, ultimately, for the audience. Because Frankie, although he never gets his mom back, he does get to reunite Melissa with hers, and so there may be some hope, or maybe that's enough. He doesn't need to believe in an afterlife. He believes in ghosts at this point. Again, most of those ghosts are his own that are driving him, but he doesn't need to believe in an afterlife. He just needs to know that that loss can be conquered, that you can survive loss, that family, great, deep loss, that family can be a driving force in helping you to conquer that loss, and that loving others deeply can help you to conquer that loss. But it's ironic because it's that deep love you feel for others that makes you feel so desperately alone when you lose someone and hopeless. And yet that's the cure. It's always the cure, is to go on loving and love even more deeply. Right? What else can you do?
Perfect. I'm also curious, the film, as I keep saying, but growing up with Italian grandparents and everything, it feels very Italian in the way it approaches death and the supernatural. Do you think growing up an Italian American how does it influence that for you, the way you view those elements?
I remember my grandmother telling us stories. Mama Assunta in the film, the character of Mama Assunta, that was my grandmother, Mama Assunta. And I loved it when she'd sit us down and she'd tell us stories about Italy. She was Sicilian, and about her childhood and things that happened to her, not just in her childhood, but as she was when she was older. And one of the stories that I loved more than as much as any other, probably more so, was the story she told about my dad, who was born in Palermo. And my dad was Frankie's dad, Angelo. Scarlatti was based on my dad, her son, her firstborn, my grandmother, Mama Sunta's first son, born. And she said that they were in Palermo getting ready to come to the United States. And my father was born. So they had an apartment because they lived, prior to that, they came from two little towns, my mother's family and my father's family, close to each other in Sicily, near Mount Etna. And but prior to coming to the United States, they'd gone to Palermo, and my father was born in Palermo. And they had rented an apartment in Palermo for a short while. And in this apartment one night, well, it happened repeatedly, a number of nights. My grandmother said, and she swore by this, that she put my father in his bassinet, the baby's crib or whatever it is. She'd go to bed and she'd wake up in the morning and she'd find him in the sink, in the kitchen. I capito, ragazzi. So she'd go back and she'd put him back in the bassinet. The next night or a couple nights later, the same thing would happen. She'd wind up and here's the baby, this infant, in the sink, on his back in the sink. And finally she turned to my grandfather, Papa Charlie, and she said, "We're getting out of here. I don't want to stay in this apartment anymore. This happened 2 or 3 times. The baby keeps winding up at the sink. I put him in his crib, and he winds up in the sink." So they leave. They find another apartment for the short interim before they take off again. And they both come to the States. So then she zeroes in for the kill, and she says, "And you know what happened after we left?" "No, Mama, what happened?" "I got a call from my friend who lived in the same apartment building." She said, "Asu," they would call her Asunta, "Asu, do you know what happened? Remember when Angelo kept winding up in the sink and you'd find him in the sink every morning?" "Yes. Well, another family moved in, and what happened?" "Well, the same thing happened to them. The baby kept winding up in the sink. And so they went under the sink and they removed the pipes and they found a treasure." There was treasure, all kinds of treasure. I don't know if it was money, gold, whatever it was, under the sink. "And so that treasure was meant for your son," they told her. "That was meant for Angelo. God was trying to give that treasure to Angelo." And my grandmother believed it. She said, "If we'd only known if God, was trying to give your father, my father, that treasure, that should have been his treasure. Instead, this other person got the treasure, and it was all under the sink and the pipes." Isn't that a great story? That's just fantastic. And as kids, we just think, "Wow, Dad, you almost were rich, and you were barely born." That's a great, and she'd tell us stories like that so convincingly. And they were.
Lady in White is one of the era's most beloved ghost stories. Does that surprise you that it's so popular even today?
No, it pleases me. It doesn't surprise me. It was. I'm glad that people are still discovering it. It thrills me that people are still discovering. I kind of like the fact that it continues to remain somewhat hidden, but it's becoming more and more known, and that pleases me. So no, it doesn't surprise me because of the themes, as I said, that drive it, and I think doesn't matter what generation you're from, it's compelling, on a human level. So it doesn't surprise me. I love it. Halloween's great because it gets a lot of action on the internet, and every couple of weeks or so I'll do a search, especially around Halloween, Lady in White, to see what they're saying about it, and it's fun for me.
Also, Lady in White has a social element. There's some depiction of the era's racism. Why do you think horror movies are a good vehicle for exploring difficult topics like that?
I think maybe you have in mind this one of these more recent releases like Get Out, that sort of thing, right? I can't think of any other horror movies offhand. Maybe you can tell me that used that or had that as a basis going on.
Let's talk about it more as like social elements, because even Fear No Evil has a social element, as you were saying, in that it's these kids bullying this other kid because of their intrinsic gayness. Why do you think horror is a good genre to sort of explore that subtext?
Well, let's talk about the the racism, the racist times as portrayed in Lady in White. This, I'll tell you something about that. This has only begun to surface recently with this, what do they call it? The cancel culture shit that's going on, and being politically correct when it comes to race and racism and that sort of thing. And there are some people who actually watch the film and then claim Lady in White to be racist. Now, there's a difference between dealing with issues of race, in particular as relates to Lady, what was going on in that era, and being truthful, absolutely truthful as to how people spoke, how they reacted, how they dealt with each other between races, in particular as relates to this story. I wanted nothing but the truth. And absolutely. And I grew up in that era. And so that was an absolute part of growing up in that era. I remember that. And the story is as much about a time and place as anything else. And it has to be there because that's the way it was. And the story involves, a key character is a black man who gets caught up in this, in the madness of what's happening, the sad part of what's going on in that town. All right, but when I was a kid, Frankie's age, there were inner city riots happening not far from where we lived. We lived in the city proper, in a house adjacent to my father's welding shop. For Lady in White, I decided to make the primary setting more pastoral because I wanted a contrast between the darkness that was going to happen in the film and these beautiful bucolic moments. But we lived in the city. My father's shop was right next to a 2-story house that was our house where we lived. And next to us was a factory, and next to the factory there was a black family. I used to play with the kids all the time. The factory had a lawn out front. The factory was called Metal Arts, and we'd play on the lawn. And then there was a vacant lot in the back. We'd play. These kids were my friends. They were about my age. There was a girl and 2 boys. When the inner city riots began to happen, I remember sitting on the front porch of my parents' home and watching the sky light up with all of the fires that were being lit further into the dead center of the city. We were maybe about 1.5 miles away. And this tension suddenly was happening that perhaps was always there, but I didn't feel it. I was just a kid. I was 8, 9 years old. So one day, as all of this was brewing, myself and my buddies were playing, and suddenly everything turned very scary. They started to pick up rocks and throw them at me. And I'd never experienced anything. I thought it was just goofing off at first, but it wasn't. And my dear friends, who happened to be black, and my neighbors, it became I had to race from them to escape the rocks, because the rocks were getting bigger and they were throwing them with more force. And I had to run and hide in an open garage that was part of the factory to escape them. I never played with them again. I couldn't. It wasn't their fault. What they were feeling was they didn't understand what was compelling this, but certainly they felt hated. They felt abused and thought ill of, and they felt that I was white and they were black, and we couldn't be friends anymore. So that was just, that was hard hitting for me, you know, because I told my dad what had happened, and I was scared, and he said, "Well, you can't go over there anymore." I didn't understand why specifically. I just knew that everybody was scared, and so that was the reality for me.
Do you, before we finish, do you have a favorite sequence in Lady in White that you're especially proud of?
Anything involving all of the scenes involving the family members are the ones I enjoy the most. You know, the family scenes. And when it comes to pure cinematic drive and force, I think the climax works beautifully. You know, from the point of Frankie's being sheltered in the cottage initially by Amanda, being helped to escape Phil, all the way to the end at the cliff. I also like the sequence where Frankie is following Melissa through the woods, you know, on the way, her dead body as she's being carried through the woods by the invisible Phil. I enjoy watching the film to this day. I have a great time with it, but only when I can share it with others. I've been wanting to see it again for a while now, and so I'm trying to see if I might be able to think of, there are a couple of people, new friends that have come along that haven't seen it. So I think they're interested in seeing it, and maybe in the next couple of months, so I'll watch it again.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you return to this one because you're no fan of Fear No Evil.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we have time for. But if you could do just a quick promo for us, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
You just look directly in the camera. You can see my screen, correct?
Yeah.
Let me.
You want me to look at the camera this time?
Yeah, you can look at the camera. I just wanted to give you. Can you see my screen right now?
I can see you.
Wait, one second.
Now you're gone.
I'm trying to share my screen now. There we go. Can you see this?
No.
Okay. Well, it's okay. It's just a little confusing. So the title of the series is In Search of Darkness.
Right.
Part 3.
Right.
So if you could just say for us, I'm Frank LaLoggia, and you'll see me in Search of Darkness, Part 3.
Okay. Look into the camera to do this.
1 second. Okay, it's recording. You wanna more close up? This one?
No, it's good. Just leave it as is.
Okay.
Tell me when.
Yep, give it a try. Go now.
Hey, I'm Frank LaLoggia, and guess what? You're going to see me in Search of Darkness, Part 3, providing I get my check.
Perfect. Do it once more, just for posterity.
Okay, you're not going to ask me to alter that, are you, in any other way? Okay, here we go. Hi guys, I'm Frank LaLoggia, and you can see me in Search of Darkness, Part 3, providing I get paid.
Perfect. So I think we can cut. That's perfect, guys.
Okay.
Okay, wow, this